People saying hi to me. Hi, Lori.
Yep.
Who else did I see? Somebody up there. Anyway, hi, all of you. Hi, Melody.
All right. So I think it's slowing down here a little bit, so we'll give it another few seconds and then we'll get started.
All righty.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Murdoch, and I'm bringing you yet another fabulous webinar. Just a reminder, you can find all of my webinars on my Surefoot Equine YouTube channel. I've had some amazing guests. I've been doing webinars now for 2 months, and I have guests lined up all the way through the middle of June, and I'm going to pretty much see if I can't book out the month of June. After that, I'm really hoping I can keep these webinars going, but probably not quite as frequent once we all start moving about again. But it's just been really fabulous. And today my guest is Becky I knew I was going to, Becky Tenges, no, sorry, Becky.
No, it's okay.
I practiced.
It's one of those many ways we can epically fail by messing people's names up, but it doesn't matter. Thank you so much.
All right, I'll let you say your name. And if you could just give us a brief intro, a little bio about your background. I know that you've done a lot of things. And so just to give people an idea who have never met you, a little bit about who you are and how you got here.
Sure. It might, is it okay if I share my screen? Because I do have that on there. I don't want to go through the whole thing, but you know, people can just sort of look at it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
But before we do that, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be on your list. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to come and talk to everybody out there on live or later. And so anyway, I just am honored that you've invited me.
Oh, it's really fun.
Okay. So we did that part already. We're going to talk about the Masterson Method. And then at the end, I'll pivot and talk about Surefoot pads because I do use them in my practice. So just by way of background, my journey as a body worker started when we had a new farrier for this horse, actually. And he was not working with mine, he worked with the next horse. And then as that horse walked in, he made a statement and then he asked a question. He said, she looks like she's got feet from 4 different mothers. And I can help her with her feet, but unless somebody helps her with her body, my work's going to be ineffective. And then he asked, have you got a good body worker around here? And so that exchange with him really touched off not only my journey to learn the Masterson Method, but a crazy passion for education and learning. And all this stuff over here are the things that I have pursued in terms of certification, and this stuff over here are the continuing education. And I just, I love it. I love learning, and it's really all about the horse and helping.
You know Raquel Butler.
Yes, I adore her. I spent, gosh, almost 10 days with her, 4 different classes, and then in between there, dissection done by Sharon May Davis.
Dr. Butler is doing a study using Surefoot pads. I met her in October when I was over in Australia, and we sat down and kind of talked about the experiment. That's
one of the things that I just feel so blessed by. I now have, you know, friends and colleagues all over the world, and it's just so fun how we all get to know one another. So I don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about myself, but really the point is the horses and learning about different modalities and more about anatomy and fascia and, you know, things that can help me to try to be a little bit smarter in my brain so I can have a little bit smarter fingers and hands to help the horses. So that's enough about me.
So I just have a question. How long have you been doing what you're doing?
This journey started in 2011. And before that, I was an investment banker and I worked in New York, and that trade that lots of people probably don't like, but I did that. And then I spent quite a long time as a banker here, investment banker here in Milwaukee, which is where I presently live, Milwaukee-ish. And yeah, so that was my former professional background. I think I'm on profession number, I don't know, 4 or something. In the middle there was a professional mom and all that came with being the primary job of being a mom. And I got back to horses actually for one of our daughters, who I just really felt the help that equine assisted therapy could give her. would be powerful for her. And then, you know, one thing led to another. And we then, for my other daughter, we bought a whole, you know, lessons, and then you're supposed to half lease, and then you're supposed to buy, and you know how that goes.
Yeah.
So we bought a horse, and that horse that was staring at my feet about 4 months after we bought him, it was like, are you lame? I think you're lame. And that's how it goes.
And so, did you have horses as a kid?
I did, actually. I grew up, my stepdad entered our life when I was 5, and he was a farrier. So I've been on the head end of thousands of horses. He was a farrier. And then my parents had a horse ranch. They bred Arabian horses at the peak. They had 110 horses. Yeah, I really had a very good notion, I thought, about horses. And I did, from a big picture, stand back herd perspective, sort of like when you look at the forest, you think you understand the forest, so you go look at the bark and you understand there's a whole ecosystem there. And I got to tell you, that's really what happened that first Masterson class that I went to. I really thought I knew, you know, it's just amazing how we can know all kinds of things and be ignorant about all kinds of other things. And I learned and continue to learn so much. But yeah, so I grew up with horses, rode horses. Anyway.
Yeah. So how did you get to your first Masterson Method course?
It really was that horse and that farrier. When he asked that question, having been all around horses, I'm like, what are you talking about? I had really honestly no idea what he was talking about. So that was in 2010. And he asked me if there was a good equine bodywork. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're saying. And he's like, you know, massage, horses. I'm like, no. So I went home that night and I looked it up, and there was a school in Colorado, and my kids were little. I'm like, well, that's not an option. And at the time, Jim Masterson had a number of videos. He was just really beginning. Okay, the dog's standing up. Sorry. He was really just beginning the process to create the education in the school. Sorry, I have to, here, I'll turn it around so perhaps you can see her. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, so it turned out, that was probably August 15th when I looked, and it turned out he was going to be teaching a weekend class the next weekend. So I went to the barn with my daughter, where I went every day and stood around like Lurch, you know, how we moms do when we drag our, you know, we haul our daughters to their passion. And I asked her trainer, I'm like, well, what would you think if I got training and certified as a body worker? And she about grabbed my shoulders and said, yes. So I went to the weekend course, I don't know, 4 days later, and continues to be a requirement, but at that time there was an guideline or a recommendation that you wait between the foundation weekend course and the advanced 5-day course. Well, you and I don't know each other a whole lot, but I don't.
I already know. If you're 10 years where you are, I already know.
Yeah, I don't do waiting.
Yeah.
Especially if I know I'm equipped. If I'm not equipped, I won't barge through. But I knew I was equipped, and I have this crazy capacity to do and learn and consume. And so I asked pretty please if I could not only go to the weekend, but then the following day, Monday, could I please start the 5 days? So that's what I did. And I finished my certification in, I can't remember if it was 7 months or 9 months, but anyway, it was ridiculously short because, you know, right.
All right. Well, that's, you know, to your credit, and pretty amazing that in 10 years you are where you are. But definitely, I having not met you before, I can tell that we have a similar personality of drive. And just, you know, we're going to make it happen one way or the other. So it's great. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
You want me to proceed?
Yeah, just tell us about this slide you've got up, and we'll go from there, okay?
Yeah, I thought it was really important to kind of start this talk just by, I don't know how many of y'all know about the Masterson Method, but, you know, like anything else, there's things that something is and things that something is not. And so the Masterson Method of bodywork, equine bodywork, is non-invasive. And it's a method of working with the horse's body that's really aimed at producing wellness and improving performance, but in the healthy horse. It is not a replacement for veterinary assessment, intervention, or treatment of any injury or medical condition, because we're working with the healthy horse. So, you know, it's the disclaimer, veterinarians should be consulted before choosing or doing any therapy. So that's what that's about. So, you know, the elevator speech that we give is that it's an interactive method of body work where we learn to recognize and use the responses of the horse to our touch and to our request for movement, so that we can find and release accumulated tension in key junctions of the body that most affect performance. And what we know is that the horse's body, just like any other living being's body, accumulates tension, and it's really about results and performance. And so, you know, you have complications that relate to tension, suppleness, leg movements compromised, really when there is restriction anywhere in the axial or appendicular skeleton. When that happens, then joint range of motion becomes restricted, and tissues, whether near or far, become tight or impaired. And so, you know, on a minute scale, that means that fascia that's supposed to be have a frictionless glide becomes sticky, and it has a slide which has friction, and that's not healthy. And so that can impede your performance, whether you're, you know, going out for a pleasure ride or you're looking to leap tall things. And then another, you know, basic example is the muscles. You know, they should have a natural ability to slide and then also fully contract and relax. And so, you know, the problem of tension is difficult, and you know, the sources of tension are myriad, but you know, the big three are tack, teeth, and toes. And then, you know, injuries and conformation, and then we can get down to riders and what they can do, you know, hands or balance or size, or even if someone is driving, you know, again, their hands. The human themselves, if you're going to put them on top of the horse's back, the rider body can have injuries or imbalances. And so y'all can see the list, but, you know, the bottom line is that there are inputs, whether external or internal, that will manifest as pain or tension. So this green zone here, we can see that this is where the girth goes. This saddle has been placed where the anatomical happy zone of the horse correlates with the anatomical architecture of the saddle. So when you place the saddle on and you say, well, where do you want to go? And you go like that, it says, I want to go here. Well, look at where these billets are. So the billets are at the red, and the girth zone is in the green. So when you put that saddle on and then girth it up and get going, guess what? This is going to go that way. Whoops. And when that goes that way, that's going to create impeding. I've got some pictures I'll show you a little while, but so we can have tack issues, we can have teeth issues. You can see right here that, you know, we have a little bit of a mismatch between the middle of the top and the middle of the bottom. We can have hoof issues. Dr. Martina was here 2 weeks ago and talked about the connectivity between hooves and body tension. And so here we can see that there's a medial lateral imbalance. Look at here, look at, that's like short, that's like long. We have issues from foot to foot. We have a little bit here and a lot of bit there. And then we can have riders who are like, what is that? You know, higgledy-piggledy. And that, you know, it's not me, but it could be me. And so, you know, these things are going to manifest. You know, when you were a kid, did you ever get in your pool and have somebody sit, you know, play chicken and have somebody on your back? And when the top person goes like that, then the bottom person has to go, whoa, you know, if you're leaning that way, then I got to like, whoa, I got to get you. And so, you know, all kinds of factors go into creating tension. And so even if we just look at saddle, a poorly fitting saddle is going to radiate tension. It's going to cause pain. It's going to cause restricted movement, inverted posture. It might have a high head carriage. There's going to be performance challenges, problems. And then, you know, the poor horse is going to get blamed for behavior issues when really all they're doing is saying, dude, I hurt. So here's a really, just quick example. Don't you love that back? It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. This horse had, I don't know what is out of my life. It was a client horse. And, the French philosopher said, if you can't see it, it doesn't exist. So the question is, was he right? Is this a healthy back? Well, you get to see, because I'm a thermographer. This is
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
a healthy back. It is a screaming back.
Yeah.
And that horse had a very sort of pogo stick gait. It was really tough. His performance was tough. When the owner went to saddle him, a lovely lady, she'd go to saddle him, and this really kind horse was like a stinking alligator. And so this results in this. So that saddle had, well, you can see, this is heat, this is cool. So you get a color map. The thermal imaging, a thermal image simply converts heat patterns to a visual image, and it uses color to do that. So if it's this color, it's really hot. If it's that color, it's really not. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything unless it's outside of what we would expect and what the norm is. So we can see white, 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 white. We can see almost no color right here. So we have bridging in the middle. We have panels that are too narrow or tight and forward. They're just like what I showed you in that image before, where you put the saddle on where it belongs, you girth it up, and then it wooms forward. And it's complicated by this saddle because it's too narrow. So again, we can see the white here. We can see back here that the contact is too great on the sides and it's too little on the insides because we don't have a uniform heat register. That ought to be, it's kind of like skis, the idea of the panel of the saddle is that it makes really sort of, even contact, and it disperses the weight on a horizontal plane from the perpendicular plane of the rider's weight. And it ought to do that evenly, uniformly, and without impingement, which is not what we see here. So I just wanted to show you that. And, the horse, poorly fitting tack, just taking that one topic, in horse speak, fit issues masquerade as behavior, soundness, or performance issue. And it can be hard to discern. And there's so many gifts that I was given by that statement and question by Scott Lampert, the farrier, but the highest and first among them is that it really takes it takes a committee, and we each equine professional and specialist is needed. Certainly you need your veterinarian and the farrier, but we all can come to and bring benefits to the horse. And with the Masterson method, what we really do is we learn to have a conversation, and we give voice to the horse. And we learn to ask questions of the body in search of tension while staying under the horse's inclination to brace. And so we listen, and we do it with our eyes and our hands. And this is Jim, the guy that came up with this method of Bodywork. And one of the tenets of what he developed is that we are in a conversation, and the horse gets a voice. And I know that is really similar with surefoot pads, and there are many symmetries that I see, and I'll talk more about that as we go, but we really work with the horse, not on the horse, and we have different levels of touch. I'll talk more about that. And we create opportunity for tensions above to rest. And we really are here, what he's doing is he has found where this limb's comfort zone is, and then he's just resting. He's taken over the job of all the tissues above, so therefore they don't have to do what they were doing, and they can just rest and relax. And so we could just sort of imagine, and I'll do it later, that instead of that hand, it was a surefoot pad. And so again, there's similarities between, what we do and what you have invented, which is amazing. So attributes of the Masterson method, again, I said it already, well, here are sort of 4 big principles. It's interactive, it's integrated, it's practical and hands-on, and it's results-oriented. So interactive. It's a relationship and it's a conversation. It's something we do with the horse. And it's integrated in a variety of ways, but one of the really cool things is that this conversation that we have and we teach others who are interested how to have is really, it's obviously not a spoken verbal human conversation. It's really conversing in horse speak and horse language. And we learn to make a correlation between our presence and our touch and questions we ask with the responses that the horse's body makes. There is a direct correlation. And that tool of training your ears and your eyes to understand what is being spoken, I use it all the time when I'm going and learning another modality. For example, when I was getting my training and certification, just to be like blunt, and if y'all from Photonic Health are listening, here's my secret. That was the first time I was exposed, really on a minute level, to the meridians and the all the little acupressure points, which I've gotten a lot of training, and when I first show up, I'm like, shut up, that doesn't work. And that was true with the Masterson Method. I'm like, shut up, that's just ridiculous, that doesn't work. Well, guess what? It all works. I'm much more open-minded at this point in my life journey than I was when I started the Masterson Method. But what I would do when I didn't know exactly where all the acupressure points were, is I'd like, well, it's kind of right there. And so then I would look at the horse for what I knew to look for that I learned in the Masterson Method. And I'm like, well, y'all just tell me where it is, because I know when your body's going to tell me, and y'all will just tell me, because I haven't memorized where these parts are, but I know it's about, okay, good, right there. So it integrates super well with other modalities, and these skills and knowledge that we gain through the Masterson Method, we can totally use with other modalities, including with Surefoot pads. So it's really practical and hands-on, and the horse's body and their behaviors really demonstrate the results of this touch and response. And when you learn those principles, like boom, you as soon as we tell you how to do it, you can just go practice it. I talked a little bit already about the fact that it's results oriented, and it's really real time. It's really instant, and that. I know I've listened to you a number of times and seen you and watched the videos, and it's super fun. One of the most interesting things when you learn to have a conversation is they are actually speaking. Sometimes they're screaming, and we were just boneheads. We didn't know, we like hauled them out like they were a dumb bicycle and thought we'd just go do what we were going to do. And, when the bicycle started bucking, we got all pissed off. So, when you engage in a conversation, it's kind of shocking and really humbling, and sometimes a little scary. But mostly it's just super rewarding, and it increases, a bond.
Okay, I have to interject and ask you a question. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in California.
Oh, okay. Well, because I'm East Coast, but we have a similar way of talking and kind of I love it. It's great for me. And directness, that's a very New England characteristic.
Yeah, well, I have among the things I've really learned as how to listen and be quiet and become soft with horses. But that's perhaps in part because I'm completely respectful that they could throw my ass around like in a nanosecond. I gotta admit and just be perfectly blunt that I am like way back the line on learning how to do this with humans. So this whole directness, a lot of people don't appreciate it, but I love that you do.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's great.
Among the gifts that Jim has sort of pulled the curtain back on is how to tie together our touch and our presence with the visual responses and releases that the horse has. So that's another kind of result. But then Jim came to this and started it when he was working on the East Coast for a big hunter jumper program, and it was about performance. He was on the payroll, and so when he began learning how to do this, it was fun, but it wasn't just for fun. It really needed to get right to the point, and it needed to improve performance. It needed to improve suppleness and mobility and comfort and behavior. And so when we talk about results, this is a horse client of mine, and we really are in a search. I often I think in pictures, and so I think about using a metal detector on the beach, and you know, I could run, or that wouldn't be so effective because I'd run my past, or I might not hear, or whatever, or I could, you know, so it's sort of like the Goldilocks, you know, you can't go too slow and you can't go too fast, but you got to go just right. And you have to learn where to look and how to see and how to know. But this particular horse was so interesting, and I wanted to document because he was kind of wonky. His feet were completely 100% square. So I got his feet square, front and back, and then I was at the front and I said, put your face right here. And then I'm on a ladder up here, and you know, mounting step stool. And so I'd get his face straight, and I'd run around here, and I'd get up behind him, and I'm like, dang it. And so then I come back down because his head was over here before I took the picture. And I did that 3 times. And he didn't move his feet, and I pulled his head back, and I ran up here, and I tried to take a picture, and his head was back over there. And by the 3rd time, I'm like, oh, right, got it. You can't stand with your head face forward. Got it. So I took the picture, and then I worked with him for an hour and 20 minutes. And I'm like, okay, I was not a believer really, but at this point in my Masterson journey. And, but I could see that he was wonky, and he has these, you know, way big wither pockets, and, you know, he's wonky here. He's pretty straight kind of ish right here. And then after an hour and 20 minutes, I really seriously, I cried. I cried because he's standing in, I'll cry right now. You know, I mean, how do you spend an hour and 20 minutes with your hand on a creature and suddenly look at his ears, look at the tension in his neck. Look at the wither pockets, which aren't. It was remarkable. The trainer, the next day rode the horse, and she hadn't told me anything about the horse before I worked on it, with it. But the next day, at the end of the session, she's like, oh my gosh, this horse he's lovely, and he's amazing, and he jumps like Superman, but dang, if I have to go from a right, which way she was going, from a left canter lead, and then do a flying lead take, change to the right. She's like, seriously? I mean, I got to hold him together. I got to push him in. It's like, it is like a workout. And the next day it was like cutting butter. It was amazing. And,
so Dr. Mole has a question for you on that picture.
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Mole, how are you?
She says, great how the horse gets his straightness back, but don't you feel there's a rotation of the withers to the left? What do you think about that? And did it change later?
There is a rotation. Well, I don't know if it's a rotation or a weighting issue. And he's standing heavier on his left front than his right. At this point in my life, I didn't have Surefoot pads, so that would have been super cool to be able to stick them under his feet and see whether he was weighting to the left or not. There's a picture we're going to come to later where I show a depiction of the thoracic sling. You know, it could be that we have a whole thorax. I think about the thorax like a Viking ship. And so, you know, if this is the bottom down here, the bottom of our ship, it could be like that. And if the Viking ship thorax is like that, then so the bottom, where's my pointer?
So by thorax, we're talking about the rib cage and the sternum.
And right. The ribs and what's coming out of the thoracic vertebra are our dorsal spinous processes, which are like right there. So what happens if that whole thing is like that? And what we have is the bottom of the ship, the bottom of where's my pointer? The thoracic sling pointed that away, and the top pointed that away. I also didn't have knowledge I have now that I didn't have then, because if I'd have looked at that, I'd have said, well, what the heck is that? I mean, we've made a ridiculous progress, but let me see what else I can do. Because now I know there's some things questions I can ask of the tissues of the body, to say, well, if y'all are like tilted that away, what happens if I ask you to tilt that away? Will you straighten out? So,
and is that bright spot on the left side of his wither just a bright spot, or was it a white patch? Yeah,
I can't recall.
Okay,
but
it really stands out in both pictures. That's why I was wondering.
This one, it's bigger and it's shiny, and whoops, the sun was, you know, flying in. I can't recall. This little one right here looks like it was, and I don't honestly recall whether or not, but you know, I would look at that and go, well, I can tell you right now, I wish I could whip my thermal imaging camera out, because that would appear to be the case, that there's some white hairs there, but I honestly can't remember.
Okay, no problem.
So, you know, here's another view that was after about an hour of work. And again, we're looking for, we're searching for and attempting to release tension. So this is a little pony, and it looks like he has a conformational dilemma. Looks like he stands base narrow and both back, like really, really a lot in the back and really a lot in the front. And the farrier was here that day, and he was about ready to do his work. And I said, you know what? Could we possibly put this pony at the end of the list? He's like, I don't care. And I said, okay, well, let's just take a look at what we got. And because he was talking about what he was going to do and how he needed to do the feet and what he needed to do the shoes and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, can I please just like have an hour? And he's like, sure, go ahead. So we have kind of base narrow in front right here and super base narrow behind. And then I had an hour, and look what we had. And we had, that's pretty good improvement between here and there.
Oh, I think the back feet are the most impressive.
Super profound.
Yeah.
Super profound. And, you know, the farrier's like, what'd you do? I'm like, I'm not telling. I didn't tell him that. But
somebody's asking what camera you used for those pictures.
My phone.
Yeah, iPhones today are amazing. I shoot most of my stuff with my iPhone. I have an iPhone Pro. And
yeah. This, you know, I have my phone. It's kind of an appendage. And so I wear these work pants with a pocket on my right leg. And you know, when I die, I'm probably going to have a burned in place on my right leg.
They clarified their question. What thermal camera do you use?
Oh, sorry. It's a big one. I don't remember the 3 digits that go with it, but it's one of those 5-digit numbers in terms
brand?
of price. No, in terms of price. 560 is coming to mind. I can't remember.
Okay.
All
right, we can find out later.
Yeah. So back to the Masterson, you know, method. What we teach in our courses, and there are 2-day courses. That's the foundation course. Somebody wants to learn more, then they go to an advanced course, which is a 5-day course. And you know, you can be done at the 2-day, or you can be done at the 5-day, or if you want to get certified, then that's the next step in the process. But we teach people how the body speaks, where to look in order to listen, and the art of listening through feel. And then once we learn where to ask the questions and how to listen and how to feel, the body tells us how much presence, pressure, or motion. And when we're asking for range of motion questions, it tells us how much is just right. It tells us where there's discomfort or tension and where it's located. And it tells us when there has been a diminution of tension. I might not be gone all the way, but there are things that we know to look for. So really, it's a gift of the conversation. And when we inquire and listen to what their body has to say, and therefore what they have to say, and we adjust our pressure or non-pressure in accordance with what we hear and what they need, then we achieve not only body improvement and the result we desire in terms of releases, but we also have this super fun gift of a relationship. You know, there are certain horses that just stick out in your mind, and this one was one of them. And I actually had a little bit of a crisis before I worked with him, because I understood the program he was working in, and I understood that his body had done what it needed to do in order for him to endure his life. And I really felt like I wasn't entirely sure that was nice, that I would take away that support system. And but there was an edict I had to work with this horse, and so I put my big girl pennies on and said, okay, Tony, you and I are going to do this thing. And it was really sobering for me, because I would have left him in a place which wasn't good. And he came to a place, he was very withdrawn, he was very closed off, he was not communicative, he was either deep inside or way far off. And at the end of our session, I actually, like, if he could have got even closer, he would have. And it was just remarkable how much he benefited from it, his psyche benefited from it, and his body benefited from it. And, you know, sometimes we can get into tension patterns and restriction patterns, and it's not serving us anymore, but it has become habitual. And it's a little bit like a rat on a wheel, and the body's like, okay, this is what I do. This is all I have to do. And what it really would benefit from is somebody like you with your tools, or me with mine, or the vets with theirs, if we just put a stick in the spokes and eject the rat. And that is in part, I think, what happened with that horse. So that was a real blessing. You know, as we're working with the Masterson Method, where we're looking to find and release tension, the whole foundation of Jim's method of body work is that we work with the nature of the horse. So they're a herd animal, and they seek protection in the herd. They have subtle and not so subtle inter-horse communication. They play follow the leader, and they mirror one another. You know, they're either all grazing and relaxed, or somebody puts their head up and butts their ears up, and then, you know, like, I don't know what we're listening to, but I'm listening to. You know, somebody looks, and like everybody looks, like, I know what we're looking at, but I'm looking too. Somebody runs ass, and it's like, I know what we're running about, but I'm running too. You know, so they mirror, and they follow whoever's in charge, maybe grudgingly, but anyway. And they have a survival need that depends on the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but concealment. Truly concealment. And we all know this. You know, they're a prey animal, so they should show no pain, they should show no lameness, and they should definitely show no sickness.
And I keep telling people, because I think it's important for us to realize we do exactly the same thing. And we actually are prey animals. The thing that makes us different is that we can make tools. But, you know, when I take people to Africa on safari, and you don't have a tool, and you're out there horseback amongst the game, it's amazing how the perspective shifts. But the whole idea of concealing is something that we all do. And because I think signs of weakness, and you see so many people are unable to show signs of weakness to their detriment till they really injure themselves, because we're vulnerable. And the last thing horses and people want to be is vulnerable. You know?
Yeah, we also don't want to feel our shit just to, like, say a word that we probably shouldn't say. You know, we could be edited out, we could bleeped out, but, you know, we don't want to deal with it. We want to avoid it. We want to be split off, and, you know, like, it'll all be better if I just don't deal with it. And that is absolutely true with the horses. And it's part of what we work with them, you know, because they are the ultimate prey animal. Their first choice is to run. Their second, you know, if that's not an option for them, which mostly it's not when we're with horses, we got a halter, we got a rope, we got, you know, we got all kinds of things we've tethered them down with, but even then they might run. But if that option is not available, then they're still going to have a physiologic reaction. And that's where you have the brace, the push, you know, then we have brace with action. You know, that's where they push, they kick, they paw, you know, they bite, they whatever. But in any case, they want to guard against intrusion. And it's really, this is the key where we learn in the Masterson Method, and we help other people to learn to bypass their guarding by applying different levels of pressure so that we're below the trigger, which causes us to have to work very oppositely to where we really like to. You know, me in particular, you know, I just want to barge on through and get her done. And that doesn't work, and we have to be under their brace response. And so we learn to read the horse's body's response to our touch, and there's this process that we use that's a 4-step process. We search for a response, and then we stay. And we stay and we stay and we stay until we see a release. And so when we're searching, we're learning to correlate the body's responses to our presence at some level of touch. And then we look for certain things. It's kind of like that metal detector, but it's not an auditory ding, 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 ding. What happens is if you run your hand along, you get a visual, if you know where to look and how to look. There's a blink, there's a scrunch, their lips will quiver, or like really quiver, their breathing will change. And what that tells you, what you learn, is how to correlate your search with the body's reaction. And just like with the metal detector, if you get a ding, 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 you're going to be digging for the ring. Well, when we get the body, ding, 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 we stop. And we don't do or dig. We just stay, which is super hard because we have to exercise patience and we have to be, not do, which is super hard, especially people like me. But I've learned it. It's really good with horses. I'm getting there with humans, but you know, so we have to have patience while the tension diminishes. And there's I now, and Sybil's out there, and so I can tell you, I don't know if I ever told you this, Sybil, but I have a whole new understanding of what we have learned to do in the Masterson method when I took your kinesiotaping class, because you covered the anatomy and the biology of what was happening underneath the skin. But we experientially were learning to stay and pause and create some of the same actions that the tape creates. But then we look for a release, and you know, those are all sort of external list of things. The kind of touch that we use, there's different levels of touch, from almost nothing, or maybe nothing. Maybe we just need to touch the tiny little hairs, or maybe we need to come off, you know, 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch, or you know, in some cases, you know, even more. But the game is the horse can't brace. And if the horse is bracing, no matter what that looks like, you're too much. So the game is to figure out how to correlate your contact or your request for movement such that you don't provoke either the flight or the brace. And the horse will tell you if you've got it right. And so, you know, Jim came up with, first of all, air gap, but then, you know, because he didn't, the pressure, like, well, I don't know, what is like 1 pound per square inch? I don't even know. So he came up with these other food related items. So it's, you know, the amount that you could press on an egg yolk without popping it, the amount where you could press on a grape without squishing it, you know, similar, soft lime, hard lime. Most of the time I'm here. And by most, I would say probably 80% of the time I'm here. 5 to 10% of the time I'm here. So 90% of the time I'm here. And every once in a while,
in the air gap and the egg yolk.
Yep. Every once in a while, I'm moving into here because it's clear that that's what the horse's body wants. But if for whatever reason it's not working, this is the deal. Less is more.
So I have to say that you're sounding awfully Feldenkrais-like, because
I have heard that.
Huh?
I have heard that.
Yeah, Dr. Feldenkrais coined less is more back in the 50s and 60s. And this whole idea of doing less as opposed to doing more. And, and the touches, you know, Linda Tillington-Jones studied with Dr. Feldenkrais in the 70s. She took his training in San Francisco. And she has a touch rating using your finger on your eyelid. But again, the similar idea of rating the pressure level, but basically going toward a lighter touch rather than a heavier touch is such a consistent thing that we're seeing in different modalities. So it's really great to see this here as well. It
is really great. And you know, on my constant education, and I'm trapped in my house, I just spent 5 days at the British Fascia Symposium online conference. And there has been some recent research that has come out that would give more the scientific foundation for that. But it's also, I find it interesting that people, you know, in disparate places can come up with the same thing. He was standing in a barn, like working with horses, but he grew up a big chunk of his time in Africa, and the orphan primates, we won't go into why they're orphans, but anyway, the orphan primates got delivered to his family's home. And so he spent a lot of time with primates. And you need to understand how to have a conversation with a primate.
Where did he grow up? What country?
I can't tell you that.
Okay.
I'd have to tell you, but because I don't know.
So we have a question while we have a little gap. How do you manage to do air gap on taller horses? My arms get tired so that I will change hands. Any problem with that, and standing on a block?
Super fine to change hands. You know, one of the beauties of the Masterson method is, for those of us that are middle-aged, it challenges our sleepy, you know, neural tracts, and we have to learn more things. And it also challenges our not so vibrant physical bodies. So super okay to switch hands, because if you've got one hand up and you have tension in your body, remember, we're working with the nature of the horse. So if you have tension in your neck or your shoulder or your arms, the horse is going to be like, I know why I'm supposed to be tight in my right arm, but damn, okay, I'll do that too. So really good that you switch hands if you become fatigued on one side. Not so super good that you stand on a block for this kind of work, because much like when you use surefoot pads, movement is useful to us. And so the short answer is, you're going to get there, you're going to get stronger, and it's going to be easier for you to hold your hand up for longer and longer. It just takes time. So the kind of releases that we can see, we've got medium ones, we got large ones. Nobody ever told me about this one. This one wasn't on the list. So I put that one on the list. When I saw a horse do that, I was like, whoa, scared me to death. But, you know, the same kinds of things you're going to see with surefoot pads, you know, licking, chewing, this whole fussing or fidgeting. We use this perhaps in a different way than, again, I haven't been to one of your trainings, but I know that in using surefoot pads, the horse gets offered an opportunity and is given choice, and including to walk off.
Absolutely.
What we know and the way we work and is that horses don't want to feel their stuff. And so there's a degree of keeping them in the neighborhood. It would be sort of like if I'm at my therapist and we start getting to the hard part and I'm like, I gotta go. I need to go get a chocolate shake. And the therapist is like, right, we're just getting to the hard part. And you have to feel it in order to let it go. And so we value the fussing and the fidgeting, but it doesn't mean stop.
Yeah, and you know, I think Robin Hood has described it the best. She calls it domesticated flight. When they fuss and fidget and fool around, that they're, you know, they would love to flee, like you say, I gotta go, but they can't. They're not allowed to in whatever way, you know. So I do agree with you that it's the nervous system reacting and trying to find a way out, but it can't really do it in
and I really appreciate what she's saying there. And for me, in my own practice, I sort of see a little split. If there's a split up here that is a fussing and fidgeting, but if we looked actually more acutely, it's actually flight.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And if it's flight, then I don't have it correct, because the game in Masterson is to be below the flight and brace response. So when I do this, like I have this foot game that I play. So if I'm, and it's a T chart, and on the left side of the T chart is winning, on the right side of the T chart is losing. And so I don't want any little hash marks in the losing column. And if I ask a question of the horse's body, lateral flexion of the neck, lateral rocking behind, there's certain things we do asking, you know, at the shoulder and the thorax. In the midst of that question, if the horse backs away or barges at me, so his feet move, that's losing. On the other hand, if it's sort of indiscriminate fidgeting, and then it's good. Then it tells me, you know, I understand, and then I become empathetic and sympathetic, but I don't stop, because I know I'm below the brace response and the flight response, and I just need to help you with my frontal lobe, because yours is way smaller than mine, to know that on the other side of the fidget is release. It's reduction in tension. And so I check first to make sure that I'm not causing flight. And if I'm not, then I kind of, I'll be understanding with your fidget, but if it gets to like OCD, then I'll disrupt it, because all you're then trying to do is change the subject and not want to deal with your stuff. So anyway, you know, y'all have had a chance to take a look at those things. We know, just like in humans, like everybody raise your hand. Who's got tension here between your head and your neck? Okay, lots of us. Who's got tension here? You know, okay, lots of us. Mostly kind of up here. But certainly on the horse, perhaps on the horse we get way more down here, because they're not standing up, they're down. And there's this gravitational issue. We might send them leaping over stuff and then whoo, you know, that's, you know, popping down there in the thoracic sling. We got, you know, lumbar, low back. This one kind of crosses over. because we have mid and lumbar, and then we have hind end, and right here we have the lumbosacral junction, so big. So we know they collect in zones. When we teach, we've got techniques for here, stuff we teach on the weekend, stuff we teach on the 5-day. We got techniques for here, there. So
you break it down to, if you just go back for a second, because if somebody's just listening, we have people that just listen to the webinar and don't actually. Yeah. So we're talking about, you're breaking it down into head, pole, atlas, neck, shoulder, withers, mid lumbar, and hind end.
Exactly.
And so you have different techniques for those specific areas.
Yeah. And, you know, when you look at the list, you can go, oh, right. If I'm looking at the head, pole, atlas, right. Okay. I have a head up, a head down, and then a lateral cervical flexion. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Right. Because it's that stuff right there, you know? So Jim developed sort of zone specific body questions. Big picture, we're going through just about every joint and junction, certainly in the axial body. We're going through every joint and junction, and we're doing that then. We're looking for tension and restriction. How do we find it? Well, first of all, we use our hand and we look for the blinky thing, but then we ask it to move. And you develop a sense of what the original design specs for that part and how it ought to move. And so you can experience over time whether or not the movement of this individual with that question on that day, how that part moves with what the original design specs in the book that was published about ponies ought to move, or it doesn't. And then you can also compare side to side. You can say, well, y'all do really good on the left. It's going to be great. You're going to do good on the right. And you show up and you're like, what the heck? Yeah. Because that part of the body says, no, we don't do that anymore.
Somebody really likes your drawing and wonders if it's available.
This actually was a compilation between me and my daughter. It is owned by Jim Masterson and part of the Masterson teaching program. So it's totally available.
They have to go there to get it.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So this is just some pictures. Here's a head up. Here's a scapular release. I'm using the leg, but that's just because it happens to be hanging out and attached to the scapula. Because I really care about whether the scapula slips. You know, so there I'm doing scapular release forward. Here I'm doing scapular release. It's kind of diagonally back. There, I can't see it, but y'all can. That's kind of diagonally forward. So we invite this zone right here to move, and we ask, how do you move that away? How do you move that away? And then for the limb, we say, how do you move around the arc? And so then we're kind of asking questions here, and we're asking, how do you slip there? We have questions from below for the hind end. I really picked these body questions because there's a correlation between what we're doing here and a direct correlation with what the pads are. So there's lots of techniques, but I chose these pictures. This is in Switzerland. I had the great opportunity to, I got to know Martina and Sybil through Animal Rehab Institute. When I tend to wedge my foot in the door in places that probably I'm not authorized to go. And so I was able to participate in the training to become an animal rehab assistant. And in that program, I got to meet just a super, super bunch of folks, including Martina, including Sybil. So here I'm teaching actually in Switzerland because Martina and I have become really close. So there's a hind leg forward. Here's a hind leg forward. You can see that this kind of checking in is super common when you have feel. And that was actually a screen grab from a technique that's a real movement technique. But, you know, here you can see in this one where I'm copying the pony, you know, he's got the leg, his hind left medially all the way across on the hind right. And he was just standing there. Look at him. He's like in the zone, and I was bored. So I decided to copy him. So, you know, pivoting from the Masterson method to the Surefoot pads, if we take a regional perspective, the way we teach the Masterson techniques, and we look at the functional bones and muscle groups that live in that region or are potentially connected to that region, then we can search for regional tension. And so I, through Masterson and others who know it or have learned how to do it or want to learn how to do it, we can search for tension which is residing here in a similar way to where you can use surefoot pads, and directly you can see that this is the zone that goes, and you've got varying amounts of squishiness or not squishiness, and you got little wedgie pads. These are both my, all my clients. The topic of, it'll come up later, but just to touch on it now, my perspective on whether techniques, you know what, I'm going to deal with it later because it's a better slide. But I do, in the right scenario, I do think from my own experience that it's okay to incorporate other modalities with a big fat proviso that you're super tuned into the horse and that the horse isn't getting cooked. But so there's front end opportunity for similarity. Remember, what we're doing is trying to search for tension and restriction and then stay. And we need to be under the horse's brace response, which means the horse can't brace against us either while we're doing the work. And so your invention is genius, because how do you brace against something below you that's squishy? It's super, super cool. And I don't incorporate it with every horse every time, but when I got to tell you, when I got a horsey who's like, dude, I mean, my quads are good now. I don't actually need to be standing here holding you, because in every question, every limb question, we have various elements. We have the amount of forward, and then we have the amount of down. And I kind of picture, it's kind of weird, but I kind of picture that there's little men on winches. And so in the perfect world, they would all be, there would be some laxity, and there wouldn't be any of the dudes on winches who's like over, getting overtime and super tight on that side. But that's not the real world. The real world is we have that whole list up top that was a bunch of slides ago, and all the reasons why tension is created. And so the way we work in Masterson is we search for it, and then we find it, and then we got to hang around. We got to hang around, and we got to wait. And so if forward is too far forward, that's super simple. I can just ask less forward, like duh. But if down is too far down, well, that means I got to hold it. Or I got to put something underneath it. And we will often, build stuff up. But, got to tell you, when I got my bag of those and down is too far down, guess what? I'm offering the opportunity. Now, if they can't take it and if they don't want to stand on it, well, fine. You can tell this horsey was like, big, happy, happy, happy. So the same is true behind. We have these techniques where we look for really what we're doing when we're asking these leg questions is we're asking, can I be all the dudes on winches? Can I do the job of everybody who's working hard to support everything that's attached? Can I do the job? And so, here, Jim is doing the job for everybody up above. But again, we could use squishy things that this wonderful lady, Wendy, invented. So just to go back one sec, like this one, okay? These are regional tension accumulation zones. And Martina was here 2 weeks ago-ish, and brought up the topic of fascial trains. And so I'm asking, what about fascia? What about fascial connection? What about fascial trains? What about tension migration? So here's some dude, I don't know who it is, copyright Slobberman, I don't know what that says, but it's out there on the internet and I grabbed it. And fascial tension is different for everybody, but the guy's saying the same thing. My back's killing me, my back's killing me, my back's killing me, my back's killing me, and my knee too. And so wherever the source of the problem is, well, there's two things. Wherever the body's screaming, probably that's not where it actually started. But anyway, wherever it's screaming, that may also not be the dude who's too tight on the winch. And so, you know, for this guy, it's up here. And for this guy, it's here and then down here. And this guy, it's over here and over there. And this guy, it's over here and over there. And so, you know, we don't have time to go into fascia. Here's the bottom line. It's the stuff that envelops everything and connects everything to everything else. You know, that's the Tenges definition. Here's like, folks, and I gotta tell you, it is a study all its own, and it's super interesting. And, you know, after I became a hyoid apparatus freak, I became a fascia freak. I continue to be a freak about both of those topics, but this one is super amazing, which of course I just spent 5 days learning more about it. But, you know, for us doing the body work, when I teach, I regularly say, wherever you are, you're everywhere else. So the application of that in the context of the Masterson method is we have to be under the brace response. So if I encounter tension and restriction and I say, oh, I'll go right there. And I begin to ask the question and the horse is like, I gotta go. And I fix myself and I'm soft and I'm patient and the horse is still like, I gotta go. I should just stop if I have checked myself. And I really should go somewhere else, because maybe the best thing I can do is go somewhere else. And I can know that wherever I am, I'm everywhere else. And the thing is injury and improper movement. What is the impact it has on fascia? Well, fascia will begin to bind together, which means that muscles will be prevented from moving freely against each other, which is going to lead to stiffness and tightness that limits normal range of motion and preventing freedom of movement. And the thing is I call them freeways. Everybody has a different name: fascial lines, fascial planes, fascial trains, fascial freeways, you know, whatever. Anyway, the restrictions migrate, just like we saw on those, you know, like skeletal dudes.
You know, it's so interesting. I can't wait for you to start looking into the Feldenkrais method, because Dr. Feldenkrais would always talk about go as far away from the injury as possible. So if it was somebody's head, you'd go to their foot.
Yeah.
And work there so that you didn't cause the nervous system to react and to become defensive. And, you know, but this is what I love, when you know you're on the right track, because you start hearing these similar archetypal ideas coming from all these different directions. It's really, it's just great.
Yeah. Well, and what Jim came up with, and now we all teach, is that you need to start where it's easiest.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a general order of work that we have, but the horsey gets a vote. And the horse's body gets a vote. And if the rule book says, y'all should start on the left front, but the horse's body says, yeah, that's not the place for me today. Then you need to look at the horse.
That's one of the tenets in the Surefoot pads is, you know, you might have an idea of where you think the horse wants a pad, but you got to ask the horse which foot he wants the pad underneath.
Yeah, and that's the principle that we use when we ask for movement, and we have to be under the brace response. So this guy is a human guy, and he came up with human fascial trains, and he started out with Ida Rolfs, and then, you know, he's got a pedigree a mile long.
And Feldenkrais, he worked with Dr. Feldenkrais.
Okay, well, you know, we humans, I think, have really tiny brains, and so we might be super smart and have a super big frontal lobe, but we have really tiny brains, and so we deconstruct, and we take a whole body that has, you know, from the outside, and we're like, whoa, what's it made up of? And we deconstruct it. And so we say, well, you know, there's a skeleton and all these little bones, and they each have names, and then there's muscles, and they go from here to here, and that's the only thing, and they go from here to here, and there's tendons and ligaments, and they go from here to here. Well, then, you know, Tom comes along and says, well, what if I dissect and I have a couple of different rules? I follow the grain of the muscle, and I keep following it, and I don't stop, and I don't go down a plane. I just keep going. And so his dissection protocol resulted in the ability for him to determine, he believes, and lots of folks teach, including him, is that there's something called the superficial back line and the superficial front line. And if we go look at Ponyland, then two Danish veterinarians, Dr. Vibeke Elbrand and Dr. Rika Schultz, said, hey, well, what if we use Tom Meyer's dissection protocol and we apply it to the horse? And they either did it in 21 or 26 horses, I don't recall. It was, here's the reference down here, 2015, I think it was, is the paper they put up. And that results in the superficial dorsal line, which, hey, guess what? Dr. Martina was talking about that a week ago. Now, this particular image was put together by Pamela Eckelberger in her work with Dr. Carrie Ridgway. And the result was, you know, she took it even more after the sad event when he died.
He will be my guest next week.
What?
He will be my guest next week in the webinars.
Yeah, super, super interesting. But Martina was talking about how issues in the feet can connect up here. And way back when I was talking, I don't know, 45 minutes ago, I was talking about the topics, you know, teeth, toes, tap, toes, 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 toes. Well, why do toes affect the pole? Well, guess like, because it's attached. If we have the ventral line in humans, it's similar to this. So, you know, if we think about, there are more lines, but going back, actually, that question that Sybil asked a long time ago, well, guess what? It kind of looked like this. That dorsal spinous process was poking out that way. Do I know for sure? No, but this is normal. This is with the dorsal spinous process sticking straight up, and this red here is the serratus ventralis, and the blue is the pectoralis muscles. Well, if any of these dudes on winches over here are too tight, and that little guy up there is too tight, then we get this. And, or the opposite, it goes like that. And like this one, look at this, you know, I wonder if that horse had, that picture from so long ago when we were talking, if he had a double girth fillet and it was too tight over here. I don't know. You know, there are things we can do as humans where, you know, we're trying to jump on our bicycle and the pony bicycle, and we don't think. So why was that horse that way? Not sure, but it could be something like this. But, you know, if I think about the regional circle that we had over the scapulas, and then I say, well, but wait, where's my pointer? But wait, what about this scapula right here? What if it wasn't, what if the issue that was happening right here had nothing to do with these muscles? And it really didn't have anything to do with these muscles. What if it had to do with something that was happening up in the hyoid apparatus? Because there's a muscle called the omohyoid, and it runs from the lingual process of the hyoid apparatus, this little part right here, which the tongue attaches to, is also where that guy goes. And where's that? That's underneath the shoulder. Guess what? Right there. And if it's not the right line, but if we were to look back, there's a different line that correlates with this, but we can kind of get a proxy if we look at that and go, guess what? Whoa, it goes all the way back. So maybe the issue at the shoulder when I ask, for example, how do you go down and back? Maybe the issue isn't right here. Maybe the issue is up here. And tension and torque that's happening here, maybe because of rider hands, maybe because, I don't know, this is like a swing thing. I love the hyoid apparatus. For me, I think it's the center of the universe. But it's like a swing, and if your swing is wonky, and it's, you know, the lingual process is pointed that away, what's that gonna do? You know, anyway, I could go on forever.
Well, and Jillian Kreinbring's going to be my guest on Monday, and I'm sure she will talk a lot about the hyoid.
Yeah. But I guess the point I wanted to make is that, you know, way back here, we were talking about having a regional perspective, which is super good and super important. And the dudes on winches could be right here. Yep. But it could be that if we stopped our notion to deconstruct and we began to reconstruct and we looked at, well, what's the vector of muscles that go this away? And then after they go this away, what all do they connect to? These are only two of the lines. Right. There are many lines. And so we can end up with, you know, tension and restriction patterns that we don't know why they are, which is why we need to be humble. We can take in the information. We can inquire respectfully and thoughtfully. We can, you know, think we're brainiacs and that we know exactly where the problem is and exactly what the solution is, but we need to be humble and have a conversation with the horse, which is what I super love. about the Surefoot pads, and I super love that the horse's body gets time. I thought I had a slide in here about that integrating, but I didn't. And so the thing that is really important, and I think what Martina most was focused on, is that we need to make sure that the horse's body doesn't get overstimulated. No matter what we do, whether it's a single technique or a combination of techniques, whether it's a single technique, even for a short amount of time, a horse can get cooked. I have had horses get cooked on a short amount of time. You've had horses where they're like, oh, touch and go, I'm done.
You know, I keep trying to remind people that the very first horse I put on pads, I timed for 15 seconds and the horse completely changed. And so it's just and you know, I tell people this can happen fast, but until you realize it's that fast, you know, you experience that, it's hard to believe.
Well, it is unbelievable. It's really, I mean, shut up. How can that be? You know, and that's the way, you know, I mean that with all due respect to myself, because you know, my puny little mind was like, oh, that can't be true. But in the same way that, you know, Desart said, you know, if you can't see it, it's not real. Well, you know, until I shined my thermal imaging camera at that horse's back, I had no idea, because that horse, even when I palpated it, you know, the other thing that I didn't get a chance to make a slide about, you know, it's all too, there's just not enough time. We learn how to discern whether an issue is new, in transition, or old. Because when it's new and you palpate it, you get an extreme reaction. When it's in, but the body hasn't had a chance to stitch together, and the fascia hasn't had a chance for the fluid to begin, you know, becoming all dry. And so when you get that transition where you get stickiness, you're going to end up with both a reaction and a restriction in the movement. And then over a time, you go palpate it and they're like, I'm good, I got nothing. Well, it's not because they got nothing. It's because, you know, like if you had a shoe that didn't fit you, first you'd have a sore spot, then it would be red, then you get a blister. And if you have to keep using it, pretty soon it will be a callus. Is the problem that your shoe's too tight go away? No. The body just, they built up a stitching to it. And so we can find, you know, if I palpate a horse, he's like, I'm good, I got nothing. and then I go through and I say, okay, good. Well, then y'all ought to be able to move just fine. All your parts ought to move just fine. They're like, no, we don't do that anymore. I'm like, okay, well then I guess it's old. I guess it's been around a long time, and your body does have issues. But, you know, it's super cool to be able to be part of a team of people. And I guess that is the one message I would leave you with. And I believe, you know, Dr. Sybil talked about it a couple of days ago, that, you know, we can knit together different professions. We should knit together different professions, different knowledges, different perspectives, different tools. But they need to, you know, the vet needs to be, you know, at the front of the road. And then everybody, particularly anybody who's working with a horse, doesn't matter the modality, doesn't matter what they're doing. They need to give voice to the horse. And we need to understand what that body communication list is that says, I'm out. So get your hands off me. Get your feet out from, your pads out from underneath my feet.
So just somebody's asked a question, and I think what I'll do is I'll rephrase that question. It's from Sybil. How, like in your experience, how have you been using the Surefoot pads in terms of before, during, or after, and just average duration? Not, I know every horse is different, but just can you give us an example?
Yeah, and you know, it would be like I'll reach in a bucket and pull one out, and that'll be my answer, because there are a variety of answers, and it kind of depends. You know, Sybil, you were like hammered it into me that we need to really take inventory. We need to get the backstory. We need to get the front story. We need to see how they're moving, and so I will go through the process that I've been taught. Actually, process is, because in the real world I use Masterson as my foundation, but I have so many other things that I weave into it. And so it may be that I will use it. I'm going to use a word that I'm not supposed to use. I'm not using it to diagnose, but I'll use it diagnostically. I might sometimes stick it under something where I'm like, I wonder how you feel about that. and I'll just stick it under there to see what they do. And if they go, oh, that's really good, then I'll actually take it away and I go, okay, that was good. Because I was just looking for information about whether the dudes on winches just needed somebody to take over the job. In that situation, if I use it and the horse like jumps off of it, then I go, okay, well, you got tension and restriction, like it's really acute here, but you might really have a lot of different areas. So sometimes I'll actually incorporate it into my my initial assessment, and I'll use it as I wonder what you'll do with here. I have developed some ideas. I wonder what your body has to say. And so I'll use it as a question to inform what I'm thinking. So that's one use case. Another use case I kind of already talked about, where the dudes on winches are like, they just need somebody to stand there a whole lot longer. And I'm sorry, but my legs, I don't need another fitness program at the moment. And so I'm like, good. Okay, how do you feel about standing on that? And Laura's like, oh, dude, good. I'm like, okay, really good. Because now I can just stand here and watch it for a minute. With the Masterson method and my own perspective, whether I'm using it pure or I'm bringing in other modalities, I'm a whole horse, a whole body worker. I almost never do a rifle shot treatment at one part of the body because I almost 100% of the time I'm going to be wrong about where the it is. It's probably somewhere else. And so I manage my time in addition to monitoring the horse's status. And I don't want to run out of the horse before my clock runs out. And so I don't use a long time. There are times when I will choose to use one piece of one modality that I have. Like I might decide, like there's a horse that I didn't include a picture of, and she was, okay, well, we're not gonna say her name, so I'm just gonna say, she was like a triple train wreck. I mean, she was a disaster. And I really felt like there were two things that I could do for her to begin the process of relieving and releasing tension, and one of them was surefoot pads for a small amount of time. And her primary zone of issue where it was screaming was the right hind. And so I was like, well, let me try the right hind. Well, that was dumb because the issue was on the right, and so her left butt cheek was probably burning. I'm like, okay, well, that was wrong. And so I put her into the left. Well, guess what? That was wrong too. Because what she was really doing is pitching forward. And so to relieve the hind, I needed to go front. So I ended up offering her one, and I was like spinning and doing, do you want the wedge? Which way do you want it? Do you want foot on and off? So I really do have a conversation with every tool that I have, including surefoots. I would say the longest I have ever had a horse on pads is probably max 5 minutes. Yeah. Sometimes, like, it's crazy that the touch and go works, but guess what? When guys are pilots and they're learning to fly, guess what they do? And learning to land, guess what? They do touch and goes. There is value to touch and goes. And we, with our little human minds, it's hard for us to believe that there can be that profound of an impact, but there really can. And so I believe it now. And I'm, if they're like, okay, I'm good. And it was like, 12 seconds. I'm like, okay, good. I am too. So we'll drive on.
Okay, so I think if we're going to say your answer to that question is, it really depends. It depends on what you're doing, what the circumstances are, and it's really about making sure that you keep asking questions and listening to responses. Yep. So our last question, and this is from Sybil, and she's asking, from a practical perspective, since you are releasing tensions that are probably components of compensation patterns, what is your suggestion of time to wait between the treatment and the horse working, ridden or not? We know that sometimes removing compensations and working the horse too soon might predispose to some injuries. So I think it's a question of you do something and then how long before you actually can go back to work?
Well, yeah, and I actually hear sort of a two-part answer there because, the tough news for the green body worker is that sometimes when we remove the tension, we unearth the problem. Mm-hmm. And the horse which walked out sound is crippled. Mm-hmm. And you didn't make it cripple, you revealed that it was crippled. And so, that can happen. But
and that can happen with surefoot pads too. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, they've stitched it together and now you like loosen up the stitching and, you know, the dude on winches and like the whole thing falls apart.
Yep.
Which is a good thing because you have to help the owner get there, because now the vet can come in and they know, you know, the horse, remember concealment. I have one story if we have time, which is like the epic of concealment. But, you know, the other part of her question is what, you know, how long should the horse have? Like in the perfect world, my clients don't get this, but in the perfect world, you know, they would have 24 to 48 hours to sort of assimilate or not, whatever you just helped the body to experience. And, you know, the dude on winch who was way too tight and just needed to have a cerveza and just relax a little bit. And it was a habitual but unuseful and unnecessary tension pattern. Well, the horses, until it gets to go out and move, and ideally move in big open spaces with lots of different kinds. I mean, here's the perfect world. Like, who has that? They get to move in open world, big open spaces, up and down, you know, run if they want to. And it's, you know, they're feeling like, oh, my leg doesn't work that way. And they're like, oh, well, guess what? Oh, well, imagine that. It does. So, you know, that perfect world, you know, 24 to 48 hours after a treatment. The real world that my horses live in, you know, I squeeze in between their competition down at Winter Equestrian Festival. But those horses are getting it regularly. I know every one of those horses. I know what's going to happen. And I also know what their performance schedule is. So, you know, you have to understand that the body is going to, it's a little bit like cooking in the microwave. You know, they tell you cook for 2 minutes, but then wait for a minute. Well, why is that? Because it keeps cooking. The body keeps cooking too.
Yeah, and
so,
this is where, you know, like I always tell people with Surefoot that to keep the first sessions really short, because you don't know how the horse is going to respond over the time, and you can't undo what you've done, but you can do a little bit and then do a little more.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And, you know, the body, it actually may need that tension. There's a student going through and I'm mentoring her and she described, you know, she's like, can I use this horse? And she described it. I'm like, whoa, you know, that horse has got a lot of stuff going on, and maybe, but go interview it. And here's the deal. You need to be really having your eyeballs open, and you need to really be having your senses open, because it may be that the last thing you should do is remove tension and restriction, because that horse may need it. Right. And so, you know, when we're working, you know, Jim's premise is that we want to make a little improvement. And I hear you saying with your Surefoot pads, you want to make a little improvement, which is counter, especially to, you know, you and I probably are those A-type personalities where, you know, we don't want to take just like a little tiny saw. We want to get the big sledgehammer and we want to like whack it out. That is not productive. And so, you know, the big picture answer to Sybil is you need to understand the program. You need to understand what the horse's job is. When is it going to be compelled to do that job again, whether or not you tell them to take a break. And so, you know, I might dial down what I'd really like to do. I have had a number of horse clients where, God, what I prayed for them was to just get a couple of days off so I could really, really invest in a dialogue and a conversation and get to the core. But neither the horse nor I had that luxury or opportunity. And so then you need to dial down.
That's one of the things that this pandemic has actually offered. I know there are a lot of people that got stuck down in Florida, and because they're not showing, they're actually taking the time to do the rehab that the horses really, really need. So there are benefits that are coming out of this, because a lot of these horses, you know, they're on such a tight schedule that you can't do what they, you know, really kind of take it down to the bare walls. Yeah. But given this opportunity without the show competition, that people are able to do that. And I think we're going to see a lot of performance horses that come out better for it.
Oh, you know, without question, you can like remove that think word without question. You know, because their bodies have had a chance to relax, you know, rest and digest and relax. And the dudes on winches have been drinking cerveza. So, you know, they've all been relaxing, which isn't to say that, you know, habitual compensatory patterns, which are not functional, they're not providing a purpose, but they're habitual. You know, those are going to stay until somebody comes along with whatever treatment knowledge and ability they have to go, y'all can just go.
Yeah.
You're not needed anymore. You know, you don't need to be wonky and crooked. We're all just going to straighten you up. And they're like, oh, we don't do that anymore. I'm like, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we do.
Well, Becky, this has been a really fascinating webinar, and I've had a lot of comments, people coming in and just saying they're just really loving this. So I hope you'll come back and we'll do this again sometime.
Sure. Obviously, I have no problem talking.
Yeah, none whatsoever. And so I would just want to thank you for being my guest, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Tomorrow is the Surefoot Equine webinar. I'll talk about ways to use Surefoot. You can ask questions. It's a little more informal. It's just me. And next week, we have a great lineup. I have Yogi Sharp, I have Jillian Krimebring, I have Pamela. So I'm really looking forward to continuing these webinars. You can find all of them on my Surefoot Equine YouTube channel. And if you want to get the email with all the links to the webinars so that you can register in advance, just go to my website, murdochmethod.com, and join my email list. I put out that email every weekend, and it has all the links, so it's one-stop shopping to join the webinars. Thank you again.
Thanks so much for having me, Wendy. I'm so honored to have been here and to be included in your list.
It's a blast. It's a really blast. And I know I'm going to have you back because there's so much more to dig into here. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, just send me skittering in a direction and I'll come back with too much to say.
Awesome. All right. Well, someday I'll meet you in person. That'll be really fun.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And bye.